We're talking about 4.4 from the Algebra 2 book, which is factoring quadratic expressions. The learning targets are to find common and binomial factors of quadratic expressions. This should be a review from AG2, depending on how long ago you took it, but we will be factoring quadratic expressions. First thing I want to talk to you guys about is that factoring is basically just rewriting the expression as a product of its factors. If you have a quadratic and you want to find two things that multiply together to equal that quadratic, that is what factoring is. You're finding two things that multiply together, multiply product, to equal that original thing you were looking at. Factoring is also the exact backwards process of FOIL and the box method, whichever one you are most familiar with. FOILing is multiplying two binomials, first, outer, inner, last, and the box method is creating a grid of writing each term here to get your quadratic on the inside of that box. Factoring is the exact opposite backwards of this process. So let's get into the first example problem. Let's say we have the quadratic x squared plus 14x minus 72. The first thing I look for in factoring quadratics is to make sure that everything's in order. I have my x squared first, then my x, then the number by itself last. I cannot factor unless I have everything in that order. Okay? The next thing I look for is to multiply the outside numbers together. Since this is just an x squared by itself, we assume that it is a 1 in front. I multiply this one times the negative 72. Those multiplied together equal negative 72. I then want to find factors of this number that add up to equal my term in the middle. Factors of negative 72 that add up to equal 14. And since I have a negative number, one of them must be positive, the other one must be negative. The easiest one is 1 and negative 72. Then we also have negative 1 and 72. 72 is even, so I can take 2 and negative 36, negative 2 and positive 36. Three is a factor of 72, and it goes in 24 times. And then I change the signs. Four is also a factor. Negative 4 and positive 18. And in fact, these two numbers added up together equal my middle term. I want to find two factors of 72, negative 72, that add up to equal 14. And when I factor them out, I have the equation x minus 4 times x plus 18. And this is the answer. This is how you factor the quadratic. And if you wanted to check, you can go backwards by FOILing x times x, outside, inside, and last to check the answer. The last example that I want to go over is if your first number is not a 1. This does increase the process just a little bit, but we will still get the correct answer. 4x squared minus 4x minus 3. We still want to multiply the two outside numbers together. 4 times negative 3, and we get negative 12. And now we want to find factors of that negative 12 that add up to equal negative 4. And instead of going through the entire list, I'm just going to tell you that negative 6 and positive 2 are those factors. Negative 6 times 2 is negative 12, and negative 6 plus 2 equals negative 4. I'm then going to rewrite my outside terms exactly how I see them in the problem. Instead of writing the middle term exactly how I see it, I'm going to split it up into these two factors that I found over here. So instead of negative 4x, I'm going to write negative 6x plus 2x. Negative 6x plus 2x equal my negative 4x. Be sure to include your x in each and every one of these terms in the middle. Now I'm going to do what's called factoring by grouping. And that is putting parentheses around the first two terms and the second two terms. This makes it easier to factor out what's in common. So if I look at 4x squared minus 6x, they are both even, and they each have an x. So I can factor out a 2x. Pulling out a 2x from 4x squared, I am left with 2x. And pulling it out from a negative 6x, I'm left with negative 3. Now we move on to the second one. There is actually nothing in common that I can factor out from either of these two terms. So what I'm going to do is factor out a 1. When you divide a 1 into 2x, you are left with 2x. 2x divided by 1 is 2x. And negative 3 divided by 1 is negative 3. You can check the same exact idea back on this one. 4x squared divided by 2x equals 2x, and negative 6x divided by 2x equals negative 3. If each of your terms inside the parentheses are identical, then we have factored correctly. We can then rewrite this line into whatever was in the parentheses once, then everything that is left over as a term inside the parentheses right next to it, 2x plus 1. And this is your answer to factoring that quadratic. Now in class we're going to be talking about some special cases by factoring perfect square trinomials and by factoring a difference of perfect squares. That are some shortcuts sometimes to these types of problems to make them easier. Thank you.